All right, well, it is time to get some more work done on the K24 Cefiro build, but this time it's not a fabrication project. What a surprise, right? We're finally diving into the wiring. So I've been waiting a while to do this. I got the old harness stripped out, kind of took what I needed off of it, figured out where I was going to mount the ECU, and then we kind of stopped there. And the reason was we still needed quite a few things. So one of the big things we needed was the throttle body. We got that. We needed the drive-by-wire pedal. We're still need to mount that. We still need to put in a couple of sensors. We're not 100% ready to do the wiring. There's still a few things that need to be in place before we can wire absolutely everything that we need to wire, but we can get the bulk of it done. And that's this wiring project is going to be the last big hurdle on this build. I mean, we've got the exhaust done, the intercooler piping, radiator, trans, a drive shaft, suspension, all of that stuff is done. The last big hurdle is wiring. There's a couple of small fab projects left, and then some plumbing, running lines for the expansion tank, the turbo, things like that, throwing the power steering in, a few small things like that. But the last big hurdle for this build to get this thing running and driving and cruising the streets and ripping in Mexico is the wiring. So it's time we get started on it. So let me show you what we got. So as far as parts go, we've got just about everything we need. So we have a Haltech Elite 1500 ECU. This thing is super cool. It's gonna allow us to do a lot of cool stuff. The biggest thing I'm excited for with this unit, one, I love the size. It's very compact, very robust. But two, we're gonna be able to do drive-by-wire cruise control, which is why we were doing drive-by-wire. So that's gonna be really neat for the whole street car aspect, being able to have cruise control. We've also got there, digital dash. So we'll have all of our information available. So that's why I wanted to have everything in place before I started wiring it, because we're gonna wire absolutely everything to this, because we're gonna be able to have all of our gauges displayed. So instead of having a separate oil pressure gauge or wideband gauge or coolant temp gauge, we need to wire all of that into our Pro Series harness that we have from them. So this already has a pretty basic fuse box setup. It's already pinned to the connectors. We just basically have to route everything to its respective location and terminate it. We've got all of our connectors for the K series, coil packs, fuel injectors. I got some connectors here. This one's for the drive-by-wire pedal, which we have a Honda drive-by-wire pedal. It has a good mounting setup that should make it relatively easy for us to build a mount in the car for. I think the only thing we're missing connector-wise is I ordered these from the Honda website, and they all came with pins. I ordered these from, I think it's Bellinger Motorsports, and none of them came with pins. So we'll have to get the pins for this connector for the pedal. And then I've got, these are just standard GM connectors, so 2-pin and 3-pin for our oil pressure sensor, intake air temp, coolant temp. So we have all those sensors from Holley, and those are going to be the connectors for those. Another big thing we have that's pretty cool from Holley is this MSD solid state relay. So this is all solid state, so no moving parts, not like a standard relay. We've got 4 25 amp outputs. We've got our main power in, and we've got our triggers. So this is really cool. So we can do fan, fuel pump, and then another high current item off here, all off one deal, and then we can trigger them with either power or ground. So we can have a ground wire coming in, and when that wire gets grounded, it turns the output on, or we can have a power wire coming in. So this should be able to take care of all that stuff for us. Pretty excited about that, but I think you guys get the gist. We have pretty much everything we need here to wire out this car, and the main thing we need to do, that kind of stuff's cake. The main thing is going to be building out a custom engine harness, which we have the basis for. We've just got to route and loom everything. So let's get this thing ready to go in. All right, well, before we can run the harness back through, we need to get these gauges out. I went ahead and pulled the sensor wires out. These are old school mechanical gauges. It does make me a little sad to remove them because it's a very JDM thing. Gauges zip tied to the roll bar. It just reminds you of what this car is, and some guy in Japan, this is his pride and joy. Oh, got that one. Ooh. Definitely gonna hold on to these as mementos. I wanted to keep them in the car, but the fitting size is so huge. I'd have to get reducers, and we're already gonna have everything we need on the digital dash, so there's no point, sadly. All right, we got our wiring harness routed in here. We've got our basic literature from Haltech, all the basic wires, their colors, what they're for, what they're capable of, what they do, and this gives you like the general overview. Synchronized pulse inputs depending on Hall effect or VR sensor. Got your fuel injector output wires and your 12 volts. Thing with this engine is there's definitely way more complicated engines to wire out there, but this one definitely has some stuff. So instead of just having a crank sensor and a cam sensor, we have two cam sensors back here. They both do a different thing. We've got our VTEC solenoid, which locks the rockers to basically activate the more aggressive portion of the cam. Would you stop blowing away? But then also cam phasing on our intake cam as well. So all of that has to be wired into a standalone ECU that's not designed specifically to work with that. It's designed to work with anything, but we've got to set it up. But luckily, Haltech has a ton of literature available. They have a whole write-up on the specifics of this engine, you know, what the different sensors types are, how they're pinned, the gist of how that needs to be programmed, etc. So they give us a really good base to work from. They also do have really good tech support, but I'm trying to avoid calling tech support. I'm trying. This is going to be my first engine harness build from scratch. I've stripped harnesses down, I've modified engine harnesses, but I've never built one from scratch, especially not on an engine with this many different things, not something as simple as an LS. So it's a new venture for me, and with all new ventures, it seems daunting. It seems complicated, but you know, before I wired an entire car, that seemed complicated too. Now I'm like, people will be like, oh, I'm afraid to wire my car. I know it's hard. I hate wiring. And I'm like, it's so simple. Like it's very easy to wire. Headlights, fans, taillights, ECU power, inputs, outputs, that stuff's all so easy. But that's because I learned how to do it. I figured it out. This is the same thing. I guarantee you when I'm done with this, I'll tell people how easy it is to build an engine harness. But right now it seems mildly complicated. So I want to really take my time and do it right. But that means this video might take like 5 days to film before I'm happy with the amount of progress we got done. So if it takes a while to get this video out, that's why. Wiring is slow. So anyway, that's been a whole lot of jibber jabbering. I'm gonna start getting to work. All right, we've got all of our wires. I know it looks like a spaghetti mess. It is a spaghetti mess, but we've got everything allocated. So everything that we need, this is our boost control solenoid. This is our VTEC solenoid, our other VTEC solenoid, our crank sensor. We've got this bunch here is our oil pressure sensor, throttle body, drive-by-wire throttle body, drive-by-wire pedal. So basically we've allocated everything we need to all the different sensors. Now we don't have everything in, and that was one of the big reasons I wanted to wait to do this, and I've been putting off the wiring because I wanted to have everything in. Like our intake air temp sensor is gonna go here, but it's not here. So we can't terminate these wires yet because we don't know exactly where it's gonna go. Our oil pressure sensor is gonna be somewhere right here, but we don't know exactly where it's gonna go. So there's a few things like that, like the drive-by-wire pedal isn't installed yet. So I was trying to wait to wire the car until absolutely every last thing was in there. But we've got the bulk of what we need in here already, and we know where everything else is gonna go anyway, so we've been able to allocate that stuff and kind of put it in that general direction. We have all of our leftovers now, so we've literally allocated everything. These are our leftovers: 2-stepper drives, some SPIs, pulsed output, 8-volt sensor wire, which we don't have. Luckily, they set this harness up with a bunch of extra signal grounds and 12-volt switch sources. So, you know, we need to run all these signal grounds to different sensors, and these need to go to different sensors and things, and solenoids and stuff. So I thought we would only have like one of these wires or two of these wires and have to daisy chain off to the different things, but they set it up for you so well with having plenty of extras. So that was really cool. That definitely made things easier than I expected. They've got the ignition all sorted together, the fuel injectors all sorted together, the steppers sorted together, the pulse outputs sorted together, and with what else you're going to need for the pulsed outputs. They already split off like O2 input or TPS and basically bunched them together with everything you need. So that's got 5-volt signal ground and input to the ECU. So they made it easy for you, for me, basically. I thought that was really cool because some of the stuff's changed from the way the harness is set up. Like we don't have a TPS, so we're using that as a fuel pressure sensor because it uses the same 3 types of wires. We'll just program that into the ECU as this wire. Instead of it being the signal from the TPS, it'll be the signal from the fuel pressure sensor. So anyway, I know I'm getting into a lot of technical details here, but it's nice to have everything sorted out and everything planned out, everything set up. We've got everything written down, so we know what wire goes to what. We can just look at the schematic and figure out, yep, that's fan out. So when it comes time to program the ECU, all of this stuff, we'll have it right here and we can just set it all in the parameters in the ECU. So that's a whole lot of jibber jabbering. Basically what we need to do is turn the spaghetti mess into a non-spaghetti mess by looming it and routing it. So they'll be loomed together for a little bit and then everything will start splitting off into the different directions and splitting off like a tree branch. So that's basically what's next. So let's get to it.
Bring all the wires over this fender and then grab each one
and route it
and walk each one over to get the untangleness out of that area right there.
Yeah. All right, while host Juanito is trying to untangle this mess that came from just splitting the wires off willy-nilly, I'm gonna go ahead and make a ground wire. So we need to ground the engine to the chassis because the battery is gonna be grounded to the chassis. So I normally solder these, and this one it's not really a big deal because it's a ground, but especially using it on like an alternator wire, sometimes the solder can get so hot it melts again and then the wire falls apart. So I went with crimping them this time. They're super sturdy, I can't pull them apart. I'll keep an eye on them, but I think that'll be fine. All right, ground wire done.
Bro, you using red wire for ground?
I know. It's all... So the reason I got this wire actually was because my Miata, I used the stock power feed wire, which is black. So when I needed ground wire, I had to go with red, so it was different. I had to do an alternator power wire, but we'll get there in a bit because that's gonna have to feed back to the battery, and we've got some other stuff to figure out. Starter needs power. We need to do starter trigger. So that's the starter trigger wire, which we'll have to extend over the other side. Alright, so that one goes directly to the starter. That goes back into the harness. This goes to the alternator. Alright, well, so we got the harness detangled. Now we're going to start routing. All right, well, it may still look like a spaghetti mess, but that's just because everything's full length. So these are gonna start splitting off here. So one goes to the solenoid, one goes to that solenoid, one goes to the boost control solenoid, and one goes down there to the crank sensor. Our other wires, it's like knock sensor, and then off to the alternator, up to the drive-by-wire throttle body, and then up to the intake air temp sensor. And then these are our injectors, so they're basically gonna start getting terminated right here, obviously. So this will be the main loom going through here. At first I was like, I'd rather keep it all away from the exhaust side instead of trying to route something down here. Now these aren't quite long enough to reach our battery. The way I want to route them, it's going to be close, but we'll probably have to extend these, which that's a bummer, but none of them are getting like a signal that could get interfered or whatever. I mean, ideally they'd be non-cut because it is power to the ECU, but I think it'll be fine. We'll have to start stripping stuff out of there too, but that's gotta do one thing at a time. So I did get this harness stripped down. So this goes over to the alternator. We'll have to extend that, but we kind of need that wire because of this plug. We're keeping the stock fuse box. I've got to determine exactly which one of these wires. I believe this is the starter wire, but it's hard to say. So I got to determine which one of those is that. One, I believe, is for the AC clutch. Yeah, you get the idea. So we'll have to sort through that, keep what we need, cut what we don't, and then route those. But again, the first priority is the engine harness. So we've got it roughly routed here for the most part. Boom. And then this is all our leftovers. So I do have to figure out what to do with this. Ideally, I wouldn't terminate it at all and keep it full length for when we add stuff down the road, but this is a lot of wire. So it may not look like much progress, but we're getting there. So the next step's gonna be to finish splitting these off and then start looming it and terminating it to all the connectors. It's going pretty smoothly, honestly. I am missing this connector. I got the connector for like a K-series throttle body, and this one's a little different, so I do have to find that connector. And then I've gotta get the pins for the pedal. We do still need to route those pedal wires too. We gotta pull them out inside the car, but we're close. Okay, we're not close, but we made good progress. We're getting there. We're getting there, one thing at a time. All right, well, I got all the mini branches done. So just like how this splits off to this solenoid, that to that one, this to this one, that down to the crank sensor, this to the oil pressure sensor. Tried to tighten it up and zip tie it, got all that done. Same with under there. And I also got everything brought into the inside that needs to come in here. So these are spare inputs, signal ground, 12-volt switched. This is our drive-by-wire pedal stuff, all in one loom. So I've got all that coming through, like basically flipped around so it doesn't go outside. It just stays inside. So that's good. That was a little easier than I thought. These are, one's gonna be for the cruise control and then the other one's for, you know, a two-step, or I just figured I'd have a couple in here ready to go for when I need to wire stuff up inside with inputs to the ECU, and then the extra inputs and outputs for the ECU that are unused are right here. I kind of loomed them here. I don't know exactly what I'm gonna do with these wires. I might just loom them up and leave them down here, but I want to keep them accessible from the engine bay, so in the future if I need to add another sensor or another thing, it's right there. I don't have to like try to pull a wire back through from the inside. So we're pretty much ready to we're pretty much at the point of no return now, where we need to start cutting and crimping connectors on. Injector harness done. Now I just got to do that same basic thing about 76 more times. But it looks good. I'm glad I got the little 90-degree rubber booties. Obviously we got to loom all this up still, but I'm going to wait till this harness is done before we can loom this whole thing together. We'll basically get it all pinned, disconnect it, pull it up, loom the whole thing, put it back on. So I'm going to get to cranking through these here. All right, well, I kind of screwed the pooch here. So we got this connector on, put a 2-pin here for this solenoid, but I didn't realize that this solenoid has a slightly different connector, hence the blue and green in the factory harness, or the blue and gray. So anyway, I need a different 2-pin for this and a different 3-pin for the crank sensor here. The 3 pins I got work for the cam sensors, the 2-pin works for the coolant temp sensor back there. Just anywhere I guess you could mix up the plugs, they made them slightly different. Just ever so slightly. It's just like where these little tabs are. So I'll have to get those. Like I said, I've still got to figure out what this one even is. I've had a hard time looking that up. Need that, need the pedal pins, and we need the connectors for the fuel pressure, oil pressure sensor, and intake air temp sensor. But I know that sounds like everything, but it's not. We can do pretty much everything but those two, throttle body, intake air temp, and then our auxiliary sensors like the fuel and oil pressure. Also, I got these MSD Super Seal crimpers. Dude, having the right tool for the job makes life a lot easier. I used the kind of wrong crimpers whenever I've pinned connectors like this for the longest time. Way easier with the right ones. So we're just gonna keep on trucking here. I'm gonna start working on this stuff here. All right, got both cam sensors wired in. Kind of hard to see because it's down there. Exhaust cam sensor, which is the main cam sensor, intake cam sensor, which is really just reading the variable valve timing, and then coolant temp sensor down there. So that's done. So now we can move on to the coil packs, which are going to be basically the same as doing the fuel injectors, just one more wire we got to daisy chain. We're going to have a ground that we daisy chain all the way and bolt into the head, like right back here. And then the power is going to daisy chain, and the only individual wires are going to be the signal wires. So it's going to be a kind of elaborate sub harness, but it shouldn't be too bad. We're moving right along though. I just always use a lighter for heat shrink. I don't ever feel like dealing with the heat gun. I need to get Milwaukee makes a cordless one. Luckily there's an open bolt hole right at the back of the head. I mean, maybe that's where the coil packs are grounded. Alright, let's try to plug them all in. 1, 2, 3. Alright, let's see if the coil pack cover still fits. Look at that, and the coil pack cover still fits. I guess I probably won't end up running that one at least. Coil pack harness done. All right, with the coil packs done, we're pretty much out of connectors until our new ones come in. We do have the alternator connector, but I like to do things kind of in a line so I can shorten and split everything as I move down the line. So we've got to do the knock sensor first, which I have the connector coming for that, and then the alternator, and then the throttle body, and then the intake air temp. But I have everything I need ordered and on the way. I found everything. So I've got pins for the drive-by-wire pedal. I've got the missing connectors for the K series here, the slightly different ones. I've got connectors for the pressure sensors, the intake air temp sensor. I did manage to track down the connector for this throttle body. It's actually a Bosch O2 sensor plug right here. So it's not OEM to anything else. Luckily, I emailed Bellinger Motorsports a picture of it and kind of some info, and they were able to help me narrow down which one it was. So shout out to them for being so helpful. They were like Johnny on the spot, got back to me so quick and helped me figure it out. But I emailed the company to find the pinout, because basically what they do is they sell this throttle body for multiple applications, and they just give you a different jumper harness to go to your factory connector. Well, I don't want to use that jumper harness because I'm pinning my own connector anyway. There's no reason not to pin it to the connector that plugs into this receptacle here and not have to have a jumper harness. So anyway, I can't get the details on what that pinout is because it's not shared with some factory car. I can just look up. So I emailed the company, Graham's, that makes this throttle body, and they basically told me no, that they wouldn't send me the pinout for it, and essentially refused to give me the pinout for it. So we're kind of at a dead end there. Now, if I hadn't lost the jumper harness that came with it, I could probably trace it back, knowing what the factory K-series connector is, and figure out what each one of these pins is. But I might just ditch this throttle body altogether, just because I'd rather have something I can actually find information for. I only really bought this one just so it would be an easy 3-inch to 3-inch type deal. So anyway, moral of the story is I got to figure that out. I do have the connector on the way, so if I can get them to send me the pinout, or if I can find the pinout somewhere else, we're good there. But we basically have everything else on the way, and we've got the bulk of it done. So I am super excited because this is the last big hurdle in building this car. Now, I know the wiring stuff can be tedious, and I'm trying not to drag it out for you guys, but we're out of connectors and we're out of time. I got to get ready for the event. I got some work to do on the Miata. Otherwise, I would try to keep pushing forward to get a little further along for you guys, but for now, that's pretty much our stopping point. We'll pick this back up and we'll knock this out. And once this is done, we are basically some oil lines away from starting this thing. We've got to do our remote filter, our oil cooler, and our turbo feed and drain. Once those are done, there's nothing in the way of starting this thing after we finish the harness out. So that is super exciting. And past that, driving it, we're some coolant lines away, and then finishing it, we're just a few fab projects away. I need to put a power steering pump in. I want to build a catch can to go in that corner. We need to build an air inlet here, a couple other small things like that. But we're very close to starting it. pretty close to driving it and not too far off from finishing it. So it's super exciting. Again, I know I said it before, but this was the last big hurdle, building out this engine harness, and it has gone way easier than expected. Haltech does a great job of giving you all the information you need to figure it out yourself and really setting you up with a good base with their Pro Series harness. So I'm stoked. I know this doesn't look like a lot of progress, but to me, this is pretty exciting. So yeah, with that being said, we're gonna go ahead and end it here. We're doing a drift competition this weekend, and we're back full force on this thing. We're gonna get this thing started in the next week. I really hope we can do it. So keep your fingers crossed, and hope to see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Goodbye.